Hey guys, in this video, we're going to expand on what we looked at in the previous video of this basic series to see exactly how note and interval labels combine to tell us what we need to know about musical relationships. So what we've seen so far is that individual notes are labeled by letter names and intervals or scale degrees are labeled by numbers. And together, these alphanumeric characters give us a vocabulary to talk about and describe musical patterns. But what's cool is that these two sets of symbols, letters and numbers, actually communicate something more, and it's the relationships that exist between the notes and intervals in these patterns. And in the previous video, we saw how the colors and shapes inherently communicate these patterns more intuitively using a streamlined interface that combines the letters and numbers into one single set of symbols. So to recap, we have two sets of symbols, letters to identify the individual notes or the fixed pitches in music, and then we have scale degrees to highlight the intervals between those notes, the distance between those notes, and the relative position of each individual pitch within this overall pattern. Like we talked about in the previous video, the letters show the fixed nature of pitches, and the numbers show the variable nature of intervals and how they can shift from one key to the next. Again, watch the previous video in this basics series because that explains exactly what I'm talking about here, the fixed and variable nature of notes and intervals. So these two sets of symbols are distinct in that they communicate two different things, but they're also complementary because when they're combined, they reveal more than just the individual notes and the intervals between them. They also illuminate the connections between these notes and intervals, the relationships in music, the bonds or links that are inherent in the patterns at play. Now again, it can be a little bit abstract and difficult to visualize what I'm talking about when I say relationships in music, especially if we're using just letters and numbers to visualize the pitches and intervals in musical patterns. Now the colors and shapes illustrate this beautifully and directly, these relationships, which I'll show here in a second. But to really get at the concept of relationships, let's use an analogy and one that we all can understand and relate to, which are relationships in a family. The same basic concepts apply to the patterns in music. Okay, so imagine that the notes in a key are like the people in a family, where the letter name of each pitch is like the name of each person, while the scale degrees are like the titles used to describe the different members of the group. So for example, just as the names Jean, Bob, Kate, and Tim tell us who's who in a family, the letter names identify which pitch is which in music. And in the same way that the titles of mom, dad, sister, and brother describe the various roles these people play, the numbers we use in music show the general position of each interval within a given key. Now in music, the labels we use to identify the individual pitches and intervals don't communicate as intuitively the types of relationships that are at play as, say, the titles of mom, dad, sister, and brother. So looking at the key of C, for example, we have the C note, interval 1, that is closely related from its connection in the circle of fifths to notes F and G, or intervals 4 and 5. Alphabetically, it doesn't really make sense that C, the letter C, would be connected to letters F and G. Likewise, the number 1 it's not obvious that it's related to intervals 4 and 5. These alphanumeric characters, C, F, and G, or 1, 4, and 5, are kind of dispassionate, sterile labels that don't really communicate, wow, there's a strong connection between these notes and intervals, C, F, and G, or 1, 4, and 5. But the colors show that red, C, is closely connected to purple, red, F, and red, orange, G. That strong connection, that strong bond is baked into the colors and shapes. You can see it right away. So trying to describe the relationship between, say, notes C and F, or intervals 1 and 4, it's really like trying to say, hey, there's a strong connection between this child and its parent, between the sister and the mom. But 4 and F don't really say mom, right? You know there should be a strong connection between a parent and the child. And in this case, the letters and numbers totally fall short, but the colors red, and purple red totally communicate the fact that there is a strong connection there. The relationship is baked into the colors and shapes. Likewise, in the key of C, the E note, yellow, is closely related to A and B, or in the key of C, intervals 6 and 7. Interval 3 is closely related to intervals 6 and 7. There's nothing about the numbers 3, 6, and 7, or the letters E, A, and B that would tell you intuitively that there's a strong connection here, right? E, A, and B are indeed strongly connected, but you can only really see it with the colors and shapes. You can't see it with the numbers and the letters. So going forward, this is what I mean by the relationships between certain notes and intervals. There are special connections and bonds at play within a given key that aren't inherently obvious through the letters and numbers, but are there, and they inform how these patterns work and why certain notes and intervals sound especially good together as we start to get into harmony and all of that. Now, what's beautiful is that these relationships exist in a given key. So you could look at things from the perspective of, say, the mom. The mom here has certain relationships with everyone else in her family. Likewise, the dad has his own special connections and relationships with the others in the family, as does the sister and the brother. Everyone is looking at these relationships from their own perspective. They have their own worldview and links and ties between the others in a group. The same concept applies to the notes in a given key, for example. So in the key of C, you have the C note, and it has its own intervals and relationships and ties with all of the other notes in that key. Now, in a given household, these relationships are multi-dimensional, which makes for a dynamic household. For example, the mom has a special relationship with the dad, which is different than the one she has with the daughter or with her son. And the dad has a special relationship with the mom, which is different than what he has with his son and with his daughter. From the sister's perspective, she has her own relationship with her mom, which is different than that of the one with her dad and with her brother. And the brother has his own special connection with his sister, his own bond with his mom, and his own special link with his dad. The same concept applies to the notes in a given key. C has its own special relationship with F and G. E has its own special relationship with, say, A and B. D is connected to A in a different way than it's connected to E. B is connected to G in a different way than it's connected to E or A, etc. There's a lot going on with the relationships in a given key. Now, what's beautiful is that even within one key, within the key of C, for example, it's very multifaceted, very dynamic, because there's a lot of relationships at play, a lot of interpersonal relationships between the notes and intervals. But there are 12 keys, so there's a lot of relationships as you shift from one key to the next. A given note or interval plays a different role from one key to the next. So in the key of C, for example, the C note, the tonic, interval 1, plays a very central role in that key. But in the key of F, C is the 5th note, or interval 5, and it plays a different role in that key. Or if you shift to the key of G, C then plays the interval of 4, the 4th interval, the subdominant, which is a different role in that key, and you multiply that out by all the permutations and relationships between notes, there's a lot going on. And if you just use letters and numbers to try to visualize this interconnected web, it can get a little crazy, right? But with the colors and the streamlined interface, you can start to see all of it, and you can really start to dissect it more easily, more intuitively, and start to see the geometry that's at play within all of these relationships. Oh, what a tangled web we weave, right? With humans, we are so interconnected, so socially interconnected, that we're separated from each other only by a few degrees from everyone else on the globe. The same applies to the notes and intervals in music. There's a lot of relationships, and it's very dynamic, very multifaceted. And once you can actually see these patterns and start to pick them apart, music starts to make sense. You can unlock the patterns that are at play. And these relationships inform every pattern you play, from scales to chords to progressions and entire songs. So that's what I mean by musical relationships. That's what's going on in music. And when you start to pick apart these relationships, you can start to leverage the energy that's within music inherent to these patterns and really start to make some awesome music. So thanks for watching, and I will catch you in the next video.